truth,
love,
and the good.
Here we go.
Welcome to the DTPHD Podcast. Welcome to you guys watching or listening to this. It has been a while since I put out a podcast here, and I've been busy with a lot of online courses and updates. And this special occasion, I thought I would bring out the mics. In fact, these are Stefan's mics that he brought out. And meeting my good friend, Stefan Ravalli, for the first time in person for like the past 3 years, I think. We haven't been able to meet in person yet until now. So
3.5 years.
Almost 4 years. And we are in Disney World, Orlando, Florida. And I'm here for a family reunion. And it happened to be that Stefan was also doing some business up here. So serendipity has brought us together for this occasion. And we've been working on a project that I think all of our audiences would want to hear about. So we want to get this on the podcast for you. And Stefan, welcome. In case people don't know about you yet, we've done a couple guest podcasts together. How about you introduce yourself to our audience, Stefan?
Yeah, I'm a meditation teacher. That's my background. I've recently begun to basically take it into a playing field where I think principles of Eastern spirituality and meditation really get tested. That's the world of hospitality and service that I have a deep background in. And I'm basically putting them together. I'm fusing them. I'm saying it all happens here. It doesn't have to happen in a monastery or a retreat. Everything I'm working on while serving tables, it's all tested there. And I get all of the realization and self-mastery tools there. And also, I'm taking principles of service and taking them into everyday life, anywhere outside of service, and seeing how it elevates that and advances, all of the connection possibilities you can have with people and everything. So that's what's happening. It's an education project to basically bring these ideas into new contexts, into places they're not normally brought. And it's really exciting for me right now.
Cool. Yeah, great to meet up again in person.
Yeah.
We've been having a lot of video chats and working on this project together.
Yeah.
So it's cool to finally meet up in person. I am David Tian, Ph.D., in case you didn't know that. And it's the first time hearing my voice. For over the past 12 years, I've been helping hundreds of thousands of people from over 87 countries attain success, happiness, and fulfillment in life and love, in dating, relationships, masculinity, and in lifestyle. And now, more recently, we're working together in the space of meditation and bringing insights from Asian philosophy to bear on your life and how that can improve your life. And one of the themes we wanted to discuss for this podcast is the idea of hypocrisy. So this was actually your brainchild. I think you came up with it first, Stefan. So would you like to just start us off on this theme so we can jam on it?
Totally. Yeah. What I love about, I guess, the sort of journey, the spiritual journey, if you want to call it that, the journey of self-discovery, self-realization, is you encounter a lot of ideas and concepts that might have seemed ugly or dirty. And you see them play out in your life and you realize the power and virtue of them. And hypocrisy is definitely one of them. And it's definitely a dirty word. It's a great way to indict an organization or a government or a person, basically say, you're a hypocrite. Whatever you preach and propose, it's you don't practice it yourself, or you certainly are not a living example of it to the T. I found contradictions. And, if we ever catch ourselves being a hypocrite in life, we definitely tend to indict ourselves as well. So I've got these new spiritual principles I'm practicing and I'm attempting to live and I'm telling people about, right? And, but no, I got angry and I criticized someone. I'm such a hypocrite. and then we're I failed, as though hypocrisy is a failure. And for me, I don't like to look at anything as a failure or as a stigma in any of these kind of dirty or grimier aspects of living in life to be a sort of diversion off the spiritual path. In fact, it is an absolute beacon of progress when you encounter hypocrisy in your life. It's basically ideas that you've been kind of practicing, living, attempting to live, have now run into a new, obstacle, a new testing ground, a new something. And yeah, tension occurs, within yourself. And that's how you deepen your connection and your understanding of these ideas that are really complex and really do have trouble fitting into the difficulties of life. And what I want to do is celebrate that tension and celebrate those feelings of getting, knocked off track, basically.
Yeah. When you're improving in something, it's a process. And at the beginning, you have to embrace this identity that you're now this person who, well, we'll take it, for example, meditation. Now you're a meditator. At some point, you go from trying it out to actually thinking of yourself as, I'm somebody who meditates. And yet there are still going to be those days when you don't meditate and you fall off the bandwagon, so to speak, or you get rid of that, or you fall off that habit. And you might think, oh, now I can't claim that I'm a meditator. But that's part of the journey, right? It's part of the process. In the world, society seems now, especially in the modern West, bringing to task shit that you've done 20 years ago and now throwing it in your face and having trying to hold you accountable to something that was so long ago and saying you're a hypocrite because at this earlier time you were thinking a different way. That to me is a sign of deep immaturity. And it's like a deep immaturity in the society. So as you become more mature, and you see this among like the Buddhist icons or the sages in Asian literature through history, that there's a kind of maturity that comes from whatever question the student is asking is coming from that student's perspective and background. So the teacher teaches to that student's background at that level. In fact, in Buddhism, in Buddhist teachings, there's a whole term for it, upaya, right? It's like expedient means, which are you teach it for what the student needs to hear at that point in his life. And the student might be really green and super gung-ho and enthusiastic and like, I will never betray any of these principles ever. Sort of like Paul or it was not Peter, before he became the one who denied Christ or whatever. And that's also in the Christian tradition. And you're like, okay, the teacher says, yes, I can see this. Your enthusiasm is very laudable or whatever, right? And then the inevitable happens. The person backslides, he betrays, he's not perfect, it turns out. And the teacher said, oh, yes, I knew this was going to happen. And just come on back. This has happened to all of us. And it's not something that you need to hold yourself accountable to because the hypocrisy and the fear of it is like based in toxic shame. That if I have any contradiction in myself, then what does that say about me? I'm shameful. I'm not worthy of being exposed to the world. I'm not worthy of representing these values or whatever and putting myself out there. But the mature realizes that nobody's perfect. It's never 100%. And it's all a process. And embracing that whole process includes forgiveness when things change, forgiveness when you're in the transformation, when you're on the path, and having more, grace for yourself along the way. So I'm mixing lots of Christian terms along with Buddhist terms and Confucian terms.
You're a hypocrite.
Yes, I'm a hypocrite. I'm mixing. I'm a mixer. But it's a lot of that is like I see this in the modern world of the sort of witch hunts, trying to hold people accountable to stuff that was so long ago and not realizing people change and they really do transform. And they really can have 180-degree change while still being the same person, and that being all part of their journey, and what makes their lives richer and makes their personal experience that much more, that much stronger, and that much more able to help others because they've gone through all that. Yeah,
and I think the biggest problem we have, and it definitely is a discouraging agent for anyone, interested in maybe like a more conscious, spiritual, mindful path, is this idea of identity. So like, as soon as we're doing this stuff, we now have a certain identity as practitioner that we're supposed to uphold. And then we do something that somehow doesn't represent this identity. And now now that is a black mark on our spiritual report card. When I think the whole idea of you practicing anything like this is you are not this like rigid sort of vessel of virtue that has to be like, carried through the world as this shining, flawless example. You are a lab rat and in a very, very valuable way to everyone. you are taking these ideas, running into walls with them, and then now you have something to use to instruct others. I experienced this tension, this contradiction, this challenge carrying forward this better person that I'd like to be. And you now have something you can use to help people. So like hypocrisy is something that can be used to assist, not something used to discredit someone else, or discredit yourself and say, oh, I'm not a good representative. I'm a hypocrite. No, you're an ideal representative because you're a hypocrite, because you experience these contradictions and you can now pass on your experiences and what you've gained from them. And, we'll do this. I mean, I find myself still castigating myself. I almost said castrating.
Don't do that.
Castigating myself, and, my wife and I do this to each other. Like, she's a meditation teacher as well. And, and we might get into like some argument and get lost in this, like, lower animal battle. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh, you see, you're a meditation teacher, huh? I thought you were. What's this about then? And so we always do this. We always like take this, like the other person's proposed identity and then like use it against them, to like say your behavior is not reflecting that. But then after we come to our senses, we realize that, we've just gone through a very valuable experience. And that is, I think, really what the spiritual process is all about. You are not just glossing over the world in this big, beautiful, happy sort of picture of everything is perfect. You're actually cultivating your ability to hold contradictory ideas in your awareness. So like, I think we're all one and we all need to get along and we all need to treat each other as, an extension of ourselves. And at the same time, I need to have boundaries and I need to know when to put someone in their place. And these two ideas are going to kind of grind against each other. And it's our own process of growing awareness and awakening as practitioners that will allow us to reconcile them as like gracefully as possible to be able to benefit, the collective, basically.
Yeah, I'd push it also for in my industry of helping guys with their dating issues and relationships and so on, that there's also a kind of judgmentalism that comes along with the hypocrisy as a major component of it. So in one of the Facebook groups that I'm in, I saw a post recently that where it was somebody had posted an article from some guru or something. And I don't know this guru. And then the moderator of that group came into the comments and said, I know this guru personally, and he does not live his own philosophy. So that invalidates everything he's saying here. Take it all with a grain of salt. I would prefer to just delete this post, but I'm going to leave this here as a cautionary tale. Mm-hmm. This person doesn't live what he preaches.
Yeah.
And then all these people came in like, oh, thank you for pointing that out. Oh, good thing I didn't read the article. And that kind of bullshit, right? And I was thinking, every one of these motherfuckers should take a course in philosophy. Because there's a fallacy, the ad hominem fallacy, which everyone now hopefully understands now that I've just said that, which is the against the man, where you attack the man. It's got nothing to do with the philosophy. So you could actually have a great teacher, like the teaching might have no problems with it whatsoever, even though the person disseminating the information has difficulty applying it. For instance, I might have just really jittery hands, and I'm trying to figure out how to use the fire extinguisher. So I'm reading the instructions on the fire extinguisher. It says, pull this, then yank this, then point it at this. Because I'm just super nervous, I can't do it. It does not invalidate the instructions from the fire extinguisher. And the fire extinguisher itself is perfectly functional. I just stuck it using it. That doesn't mean that if I tell you, if I were to read out the instructions to you, that you can't come along and use those same instructions to get the intended result. So this is one of the reasons why everyone should learn philosophy as well, clear thinking. But this hypocrisy is, in a sense, like that, they're trying to accuse that guy of hypocrisy. He doesn't walk the talk, or if he doesn't live what he preaches. And I've seen people use this fallacy so many times to basically, invalidate or sabotage or undercut everything that somebody says based on the time that he acted out of character at Starbucks or whatever, right? He's like really pissed and he's, don't listen to anything that guy says. He's clearly not a teacher. He's not got it together. And it's actually a reflection of our own fears that our own fears of shame, that we're not perfect, we're not 100% perfect, and we project it onto these other figures that threaten us in a way of like, oh, this guy's perfect. What does that say about me? Why can't I be as great as this guy? Oh, I found this guy's flaw.
Yeah.
Right. We're outside right now, and an airplane's going over us. And it's also, in case you hear the fountain, it's a helicopter. We got a fountain in this really cool courtyard here at the Sheraton Resorts. So you're hearing lots of background noise, which our sound editor is going to have to do some tricky editing to get out of the bandwidth there. So returning to the point, being judgmental and as a common response from our own, dealing with our own shame about not being perfect and seeing somebody being held up as a teacher, as some kind of authority who's better than us in some way. And in the back of our mind, it's very tempting to be able to bring that guy down to earth or woman so that it assuages our own sense of insignificance.
Yeah.
So that we can so we're looking to bring this person down. So you have to actually resist that temptation, that normal tendency in the human being to bring down that which is held up above you, and try to look for what can I learn from that person, regardless, especially what that person's teaching, regardless of the person himself. Can I separate the teachings from the person? So no matter however that person's living, I can still get the value out of the teachings, because those are two separate things.
Yeah, and anyone that's looking for a perfect teacher is probably looking for the wrong thing, because what they're looking for is teachings they don't have to question. And, it's like, oh, this guy's perfect. Everything he's telling me, I can just follow to a T and not have to worry about it. But in fact, anything you learn, you're going to have to apply your own sense of judgment to, and you're going to have to apply it to your life in your own way, in your own clumsy way, just as this teacher is attempting to. And there's lots of ways to evaluate a teacher, and there's lots of ways that I have actually decided that, a teacher's character was not something that made what they were teaching trustworthy. And that can happen occasionally, sure. But to invalidate a teacher because they're not a perfect, or whatever your idea of perfect representation of what they teach, that's actually counterintuitive to actually do that sometimes. Because I think sometimes the best teachers are people that struggle with what they are teaching. So basically, let's say someone is naturally really compassionate or naturally really loving, they're just so good at it. Sometimes they might not even know how they're even doing that. Just like a natural athlete, they're not going to make a great coach necessarily. They just do things so fluidly without thinking. It's actually those that have struggled and have had to use their own sort of like mental models and frameworks to overcome that struggle that can make better teachers.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I have never had to struggle with alcoholism or any addictions at an extreme level. Mm-hmm. So you should not listen to me. So I don't have as much to share about a 12-step program.
Yeah.
The people you should really be listening to are the ones who've actually struggled with it. So they have so much more to share. Mm-hmm. They have so many more insights and experiences to share with you. But if you were to say, "Oh my God, don't listen to that alcoholic talk about alcoholism. He's uniquely disqualified from this because he's an alcoholic," you're actually pushing aside the one person you should be listening to. And this is also connected to the dark side. Like those who have grappled with their shadows or their dark sides, or the parts of them that they've had to fight to become better. Those are the people who you can learn the most from, because they not only have the theoretical, but they have the practical knowledge, and they have the experience and the stories, and they know it from the inside. So they have that experiential knowledge. It's just like if you hear a war veteran talk about how dangerous war is and how dangerous these weapons are or whatever, it's a lot more meaningful than hearing it from me, right? Because I've only fired guns at shooting ranges, totally safe. And, I was a middle-class kid, right? So in Canada, where you can't get guns. So don't listen to me about how to fire a gun. I mean, I'll read the book and tell it to you. So, but you'd be much better off with somebody who's grappled with the dark side of the weapons, of the fallout from war, of watching his friends die in battle and all that. And he can tell you about, from his personal experiences, and lead you through and guide you through and coach you through how to best use these weapons and how to best prepare for the battle. So we end up shaming those who have in some ways, the most to teach. And this is so I'll bring up a controversial example. When I was a kid, there were a bunch of TV preachers, evangelists on TV. Swaggart, I can't remember their names now. I should have Googled this before, but I just thought of it now. Swaggart's one of, anyway, so they ended up as preachers and pastors of gigantic churches, mega churches. And then it turns out that they were both cheating on their wives. And in fact, this story went so far that the mistresses got approached by Playboy magazine, in both cases, I think, to pose nude as the preacher's mistress and all this. And anyway, they were disgraced and thrown out of the church and all this. And eventually they tried to make a comeback. I remember seeing as a teenager, whoa, this guy's still trying, right? And so as a conservative Christian, you all judge the hell out of them. I would never do that, that kind of thing. And now he's preaching about, and I can't remember their specific names, and I don't want to use them as specific examples because I didn't look it up before this. But imagine this fallen, disgraced preacher, after 10 years of struggling with the shame and all of that, and his own guilt or whatever, and he repents and goes through a process, and now he comes out saying, this is the danger of grappling with lust, or here's what happens when you prioritize your career over your relationship, and here's exactly how you could fall into this error. You should listen to that guy. Yeah. He's actually gone through it, and he's come out the other end and is sharing these lessons with you. Instead of saying, he's got nothing to teach. Look at him. He's a cheater. Yeah. He's teaching about cheating. He's the guy you should listen to.
Yeah. Have you sublimated your struggles and your mistakes into valuable teachings? Then you're a valuable teacher. Then, you're not really a hypocrite at that point. You're a hypocrite if you're pretending that you're not making mistakes, I guess. That would be like something to worry about. Someone who's pretending that they are perfect. And I have dropped teachers like that before. Those that try to emanate this image of perfection. But I tend to trust those that are vulnerable more now. And people will tend to trust people that are vulnerable just in everyday life. Those that do admit that they are struggling, rather than those that have are attempting to promote this affectation of fully realized awesome, this veneer. That's untrustworthy. But those that are full of tension and contradiction, those people I tend to trust. Yes. Because they're being honest, And
I try to learn from teachers I try to learn from everyone, including little kids. I'll be spending the evening with my 3 and 6-year-old nephews, and I try to look for. It's pretty easy to learn. Well, they'll teach you some stuff. They'll force you to learn some things. But one of the things I've noticed over the past few years is when I meet. Have you ever tried meeting one of your heroes or something like that? Or somebody you've been following for a while, and then you meet them in person, and they don't match the way that you thought they'd be, the vibe that they give out. Yeah. And maybe that's the way with some people and me. Like when they meet me, I don't know. But that's been the way for me, meeting some of the people I looked up to and admire, meeting them in person, getting an in-person consult or, and interacting with them. It's different. I'm like, I don't really like them. I don't really jive with them. And some of the things they say in private might be like something I disagree with, and I didn't know I disagreed with them on that. Yet still, that does not invalidate any of the benefit and the value that I derived before that. Mm-hmm. Right? It doesn't. I don't then look back on all that I've learned and just throw it all out the window. I have a brain, and I've been trained to think analytically, and I can separate the man from the message. And sometimes you do want to, as a heuristic, whose message should I pay the most attention to and dive deeper in? And then you might be going off the person's vibe or even his voice. And I've been criticized for my voice occasionally, like on YouTube. I can't stand your voice and the way you babble. Hey, I get it. But what have I said? You're just attacking the style. But what of the substance and the content? And there are people I disagree with vehemently and vehemently. And people who I just, when I hear their voices or when I see them on the video, it grates on me. And yet I try to listen to their argument. Mm-hmm. What are they saying? What are the reasons? What's the evidence? And I try my best. And we're all partial and subjective, and we're all mired in that. But I try my best to do that, to try to sift out my feelings for this person from the message that's coming across, and evaluating the message on its own merits. And this has been great because what it's done for me is it's allowed me to sit with the tension that is happening emotionally for me, like, oh, I don't really like this person, and sit with that longer to get to the message. And I found that some people who really grated on me at the beginning, if I stayed with that message, I can really now it reaches a point where I can see it from their viewpoint. Even though I still disagree, I can see why they have that view. Right? We were talking about this casually the other day, like being at that point where you can sit with people from completely different viewpoints and be able to enter their point of view and see why they would have that view.
Yeah.
And how they would arrive at that and how to them it might be coherent. And trying to have some, and then it becomes easier to empathize with them on that. And that's just a really great life skill. And you'll be able to derive a lot more wisdom from a lot more sources if you're able to do that.
Yeah, and you'll be able to get there more quickly if you take accountability for what you're experiencing when that person is bothering you.
Yes.
Because the first thing we'll do is just dismiss them and say, oh, well, it's because they're, obviously this, or this. They're obviously an idiot in this way, without even questioning why, like why you actually think that. And this is I've heard this discussed by, I think, Buddhist teachers a lot. If somebody triggers you, then they have something to teach you about yourself. If you have a strong reaction to anything, there is something in you that needs to be examined, and you can seek to gain a lot from. That's why they say the best teachers are those that upset us. Because if something is triggering us intensely, it needs to be worked out and examined. And to just simply let yourself have such strong feelings and not question your own mental constructs around that is a missed opportunity to learn about yourself. And then you'll have gratitude for these people that grind against you, that wear on you, for revealing more about who you are. Besides just learning, what they may have to teach just from their own perspective, but like you yourself will, expand your self-understanding.
Oh, that was so great. We got to take that clip out and put it out separately. You said when somebody triggers you, they have something to teach you, right? That's just that on its own should be its own quote. We'll make it a quote card for you.
Yeah.
Because that's brilliant. That's so true. And the current society puts the blame on the triggerer.
Yeah.
Instead of being able to go both ways and say, okay, I'm being triggered, and maybe there's some blame on that person for doing that on purpose. But what can I learn? Why am I triggered by this person? What is it in me that's being called out here? And I'm a member of these they're called subtle Asian traits groups. There's several of them, and one of them is like over 1 million people. And I see so many Asians who are triggered by just people being white. That's like, they named a bunch of these thinkers that are prominent. Many of them are associated with the right wing and with right wing thinking. And I asked them, like, what did they say that made you feel offended? And they couldn't come up with any arguments. It was almost like just by the very nature of their personality, or probably their skin color, or the way they looked, or their background, and what they were projecting, was triggering these guys. And of course, it comes out of being bullied when you're a child and having racial epithets thrown at you, or the kind of you're getting triggered back into your childhood days, at the schoolyard when the white kids were like beating you up and stuff and saying chink or whatever it is, right? That's what's happening with you, because it's not happening in the actual content that you're clipping here, that you're showing. And they don't stop to think about it. They just blame the other person for causing those emotions in them. And it's a very immature and neurotic approach to life. And I thought, oh, that's just a pocket of people. That's just a minority of people happening in these little pockets. And I just see it more and more. So I guess like it's a good message to put out there, to beware of those tendencies in yourself when you start, if you can spot those happening.
Yeah. And, doing that is just a real tragic sort of relinquishing of your own power, because basically you're saying how I feel is just passively dependent on who's around me. If white people are around me, I feel agitated. So, life would be better if white people weren't around me. Not, life would be better if I somehow overcame and reconciled my nature to get triggered by white people. That would be a good place, a better place to start, like that analogy that Ramana Maharshi talks about, which was actually, I think Shanti Deva talked about it before that, the Tibetan Buddhist monk from hundreds of years ago. He said, why try and cover the world with leather? That's a lot of work, just make shoes for yourself. And it's just such a simple principle. And all of us would hear this and say, of course, why would anyone try and be covering the world with leather? Well, you do that in a subtle way every time you think someone else is the problem, you know, and create a rationalization around why. Why you don't need to change. You just need to somehow create this utopian environment around you to feel happier,
Yes. Don't try to cover the world in leather. Make yourself some nice leather shoes. That's awesome. And if you ever have trouble, if you find yourself having trouble a lot with being triggered and being out of control, what you ought to do is to develop a meditation habit. You ought to learn meditation, practice it on a regular basis. It will save your life. I'm not exaggerating right now. So maybe that's a good way to end this podcast. Both of us have to run to dinner reservations. So thanks so much for listening. And Stefan, how do they find you?
I am on www.serveconscious.com. Find me there. Send me a ding. I'd love to talk to you just about what you're going through in your life, especially if you have like actual service challenges, professionally or otherwise. And I have a podcast. It's on iTunes. It's the Serve Conscious Podcast. And I've been having a lot of fun with that, having awesome conversations with David and others. And I'm sure we'll have many more on there. So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, go visit serveconscious.com for more for Stefan. And for me, davidtianphd.com. You can find all of the previous episodes of the DTPHD podcast on there, as well as our vlog and our Man Up episodes as well, and lots of other great content for you. So thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you again soon. Hey, it's David again. Before you go, a couple last things. First, all the show notes and links to resources can be found at davidtianphd.com/DTPHD podcast. Or you can just go to davidtianphd.com and find it through the top navigation menu. Second, if you'd like to interact with me or other like-minded fans of the podcast, then join our private DTPHD Podcast Facebook group. We've got an awesome community of intelligent, wise individuals from literally all around the world. You can send a join request to the group using the link you'll find in the show notes of every podcast at davidtianphd.com/DTPHD podcast. Click the link, log into your Facebook, and then click to join. We approve join requests every day. So go to davidtianphd.com and click the link to join. See you inside our group.